Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Dear Forests podcast. On today's episode, I will be interviewing Policy Officer Pieter van de Sype from Bos Plus. We will be discussing the basics of deforestation. So, what is deforestation? What are the impacts on us and the things around us? And of course, why you as a listener and as a consumer should care about deforestation. So, thank you once again for listening, and I really hope you learned something from this episode. Okay, let's start with a simple question. Can you please tell us what your name is and what you do and where you work?
I'm Pieter. I work for Bos Plus. We're a Belgian NGO that works on forests. We try to promote the important role of forests and do project forests both in Belgium as well as in tropical countries with tropical forest in Africa and Latin America. And my main role within the organization is I work on policy.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So just to start off with, how would you define deforestation in 3 sentences?
Well, in one simple sentence, deforestation is the removal of forest as a natural ecosystem to make way for human land use. That's in one sentence, but if I have 2 more sentences, I will also include that it's that deforestation has a very strong negative impact. Because with the forest, what is lost also is all the species that live there, and all of the important services, the benefits that forests provide for us, they're also lost. So that's deforestation.
Okay, in a nutshell. Okay, thank you. And so just off of what you just said, how would you say deforestation then impacts climate change and global warming by extension? So what is the link?
So forests consist of trees and a lot of other plants and even animals. There's also the soil beneath the forest, and all of that contains carbon. So all life forms and plants in particular contain a lot of carbon, and so that carbon is also linked to the gas carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere, and that causes climate change. And so by storing carbon, existing forests sort of are this pool of carbon dioxide of the greenhouse gas, and they maintain it in place. But by deforesting, we actually cause that carbon dioxide to get free again and to be released in the atmosphere. And in that sense, deforestation contributes a lot to climate change, to global warming. The estimates vary, but it's at least around 10%.
Okay.
So at least 10% of the current warming is caused by deforestation.
Okay, and just for listeners that don't know, why is it important that our carbon dioxide is not being released?
Sorry.
No,
it's because carbon dioxide there's other greenhouse gases, but carbon dioxide is the most important greenhouse gas.
And what is a greenhouse gas?
So that's what it does is if it's in the atmosphere, it actually it blocks heat from escaping to space.
Okay.
So it's a gas that allows sunlight to pass through and to reach the Earth's surface, but the warmth that is generated by that is not allowed to escape by the greenhouse gas. And it sort of covers, within the atmosphere, it sort of covers the Earth's surface as a blanket, keeping it in. And the more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the more the planet warms up. That's basically what happens. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. And so when we talk about deforestation, which forests are we talking about? And what exactly is being done to them? I know that you just spoke a little bit that it's clearing it for other purposes, but how is this happening? Why is this being allowed to happen?
So deforestation happens everywhere in the world where there are forests, but it's mostly concentrated in the tropics, in tropical forest. Mm-hmm. There's also like in temperate forests with us in Europe or in the US or in other countries, a lot of forests is still being cut down, but it's then to be replaced by by newly growing trees, so it's part of forestry as an industry. In boreal climates, so more up north, it's a lot of forest is lost, but due to forest fires.
Okay.
But most actual deforestation as an issue it's mostly concentrated in the tropics. And there's three main zones that coincide with the three main large rainforests that still exist.
Okay.
There's the biggest one, the Amazon rainforest, that's located in South America, in the Amazon River basin. And there, a lot of deforestation is happening because of expansion of fields to grow soy or pasture to put cattle land. There's also a bit of mining, gold mining, and other crops. In Africa, in West Africa, a lot of forests are being lost to make way for cocoa growing, for cocoa plantations.
Yeah.
In the Central African rainforest, there's a lot of more small-scale agriculture, and then in the rainforests of Southeast Asia, in Indonesia mainly, there's a lot of deforestation happening to make way for palm oil plantations, as well as for the pulp and paper industry. That's increasing as well. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of different things. There's a lot going on, and you've had the opportunity to work in around some of the forests that we're talking about, right? And what was your experience like there? I mean, what was it like for you on a personal level?
I've had I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to really have worked in the context of tropical forests. I did that in Peru. I worked mostly in Peru, in Bolivia, and in Uganda as well. My strongest experience and connection with the forest was in Peru. I lived there for quite some time, and it's both. It's a bit awe-inspiring to see those forests up close, but it's also more depressing to see deforestation happening there. But it also gave me a better understanding of the really complex dynamics. There's a lot of because there's one cause of deforestation. It's, for example, if there's a cocoa plantation, forest is cut down to plant cocoa trees. Okay, so then we can blame cocoa cultivation. But it's not that simple. It's because in the region, a lot of farmers depend on cocoa growing for their income.
Yeah.
So it also already becomes a more complex discussion. And here in Europe, for example, we consume a lot of chocolate for which we need cocoa. So there's a demand for that product. So but that's a bit maybe digressing from the point. But it's and what was also there is coffee. In the region where I lived, there was also a lot of coffee growing.
Okay. And out of which region of Peru was your favorite to live in? What part was your favorite place?
It's difficult to pick a favorite one, but the one that had a more lasting impression, I think, was in the north, where I worked first, because that was my first 2 years. And I was in a coffee growing landscape, and I really got to know, to really understand what's happening in the landscape. I had a lot of interaction with coffee farmers, with the people living there, so you sort of understand more what's happening there.
And so was it like a bit difficult for you to kind of, because you're meeting the people that are technically doing the deforesting, but they're also people, and you can also see their lives and the reasons behind why. So was that like a bit of a difficult thing for you? I think to know on one hand the impact, of course, environmentally, and then to know on the other hand, like, there's people behind this and there's a reason why they do this. I think we all like to imagine that there's a big bad boogeyman or something, but it's really just like everyday people that are just trying to make a living. So how was that like for you?
I think it was sort of it's a bit what you mentioned. I think you already described it a bit. So it's complex. You have different emotions, because you're, on the one hand, if you see like when you enter a parcel that's recently been deforested, it really leaves this impact on you, because it's you see the huge trees that sometimes when they deforest, they still leave a couple of big trees standing, and then you can see that instead of the few trees that remain right now, it was much more, the coverage was much more. And you can also, because close by there's still existing forests, so that leaves in it's very awe-inspiring and beautiful to see. And then what's disappeared, that really leaves an impact on you. Also the realization what the damages are. also for people living there,
Yeah.
because it leaves them soils less fertile, the risk of drought increases. But then again, you have these interactions with them, and then you get to know their context and why they're doing this, their aspirations. So that's interesting as well. And maybe because what you mentioned, the boogeyman and the bad players. That's actually happening as well, because I had a very strong I've my on the ground in the field experience was more with the smallholder farmers, which is a complex context. But the story of the boogeyman also exists. It's real. There are really bad players that willingly deforest large areas, large swathes of land to make a profit, and they don't really care. Also expulsing people that live there. So that's happening as well. It's different actors that are involved. It's a complex story.
So would you say that then there's like kind of more than just, it's not a single story then, it's more, there's a lot more different actors than I think most people would imagine. All right, thank you for sharing that. I think just on a lighter note, if you could pick a forest to visit sometime soon, which forest would it be and why?
Something that's realistic or that I would like to do?
It can be as unrealistic as you want it to be.
If it's unrealistic, I've never been to. I've known forests in the Amazon, in Africa, Central Africa, but I've never been to Southeast Asia. So that would be my go-to area. And I think in Papua New Guinea there's still a lot of really pristine forests. So if I could, it's not very realistic in the short term, but if I could, I would go there.
Okay, well, good to know in any case. So then I think the big question would be like, why should we care? Like, why should our audience care that deforestation is happening? You know, it all seems so, okay, there's a blanket around the world, and, you know, and it's like, okay, well, why should I care as a single person, basically?
Where to begin? So we already discussed the climate change, so that's not, it's super crucial, but we won't need to go in detail. But there is also forests, they're a habitat they're a home, or in technical terms, a habitat for a huge amount of animal species, plant species, for biodiversity. Yeah. And we really, as a global society, I don't think we realize enough how much we depend on that. So when forests are lost, that natural biodiversity is also lost as well. But also even in an economic sense, we really depend a lot on forests. One tangible example is wood, for example, as a material which we use in everyday life, comes from forests. A lot of the pharmaceutical products, a lot of medicine is based on plants that exist in the forests. And also forests, they sort of regulate the water provision. Okay. So forests ensure they protect us against drought, against extreme rainfall, which is also going to increase with climate change. Mm-hmm. They buffer against drought, and even at the more sort of recreational level. During the pandemic, much more people really appreciated how nice it is to walk in a forest. It's good for our physical well-being, our mental well-being. So there's a lot of these advantages that forests provide, and so with deforestation that all gets lost. So it goes really from the almost existential level to the very personal experiences.
To the individual level. Okay. So how would you say then the average person's quality of life would be impacted by deforestation? So kind of in your day-to-day life, how would you see this if deforestation continues at the rate that it's going at?
I think that depends very much on where you live. For us here in Belgium, for example, there's not that much forest left, unfortunately. So when it disappears, you might lose this opportunity to have to go into nature close by. So that's an impact. But for people living in these areas where a lot of deforestation is taking place, I think the drought is a really direct. So the more higher risk of occurrence of drought is a very direct effect. But maybe still in our even here in Belgium, we're sort of connected to what's happening there. If you take, for instance, if you take cocoa, or as an ingredient of chocolate, I don't think there's many people that don't like chocolate. Coffee is another example. It's stuff that we use in our daily life and that we really like. But with increasing deforestation, what's also happening is that that affects the production of those products. And for example, in cocoa, we've seen a very huge increase in prices, which is in part has to do with deforestation as well and with climate change. And that affects us as consumers here because the prices of cocoa or of chocolate are increasing. And it's not a very strong, I mean, it's not something that's not the main thing I would worry about, but it shows how it's really connected. How
we're more connected than we realize. I mean, I personally don't drink coffee. I don't enjoy it. I don't like the taste, but I love chocolate. I'm very much a sugar kind of person, to be honest. So yeah, I definitely can understand that. Yeah, there is an impact in our day-to-day lives, and more so than people will realize until I think such a point where it's a massive impact.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, it's not to sound dramatic, but it's the whole issue of climate change. It really, that's going to affect us all. And,
I mean, definitely. I think there's been a lot of talk about like it being a bit dramatic, but I'm like, well, if we're living on this planet, shouldn't we, want it to be a good planet, like a healthy planet for us to live on? So, I think it's important that people realize that there's so many things that we depend on the natural world for, and we're just, I think, almost complacent, like, nature will go the way it's supposed to. It will fix itself is a lot of the conversation that people are having, which, if it didn't break itself, I'm not sure how it's going to fix itself, because these are human-made problems that we're having right now. So it's like, how could the natural world possibly heal on its own if these are new problems and we are the new problem,
And I think there's what you say is absolutely true, that nature and forests and other ecosystems, they have this capacity to really heal themselves, and they're very resilient to a sense, but there's only so much they can cope with, and that's maybe also why we're a bit complacent, because we see, well, it's not changing that much. But little by little, the more we deforest, the more temperature increases. It will have an impact, and indeed it will need sort of really strong action from our side to really change stuff.
So on that, what is currently being done about, deforestation? Are there international or national bodies that are, acting to fix this?
There are. There's not like really one single instance that sort of is there to solve at the global level to solve deforestation, but at an international level, there's a lot of there are commitments by countries. For example, in 2021, almost all countries worldwide, 140 countries made this commitment. It was called the Glasgow Leaders Deal on Deforestation, to really stop and halt deforestation by 2030. And there's other types of commitments, but we see that the commitment's not going to be. They're not going to get there, because deforestation, it keeps continuing at the same rate. But it's good that the commitment is there at least. There's also research institutes that work at the global level, that try to provide insights into why deforestation is happening, and so to provide tools to cope with it. At the European level, there is also actually the European Union. On the one hand, we contribute a lot to deforestation because we import those products like coffee, like chocolate, like soy. But it also came forward with a law, so a law that actually puts much more restrictions on products. That, so basically what it says, the law, is that if you want to sell or import a product, you have to ensure it didn't contribute to deforestation elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so it's really historical. It's sort of a landmark law that's being done. And it's the European Union, so it's not the whole world, but it does have a potentially very great impact.
Yeah, of course, especially if it's legally binding. Because I think the biggest issue that we're facing with all the agreement, like the Glasgow one, is that it's not legally binding. It's kind of it's just something that's a nice to maybe do for a country, so they don't have to do it. There's nobody that's going to come to them and say you didn't do this, so I think that's kind of the tough part, but we will explore the law and the policy part of it in more detail later with a lawyer, so which will be great. But so what role do NGOs and CSOs play in this? So non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations. So
well, I think we do we work a bit on two fronts, and we contribute in two ways, and one is on and what I also do, so then the policy work, which is basically it's agenda setting, it's awareness raising, it's making people, the general public or politicians and companies aware of what the problem is, and try to provide those policy recommendations for a policy or legal framework or laws that might have a positive impact on the one hand. So we're sort of also maybe a watchdog to call out when there's, or expose when there's injustice or when deforestation is happening. At the same time try to provide solutions. And when it comes to solutions, we also have a lot of NGOs. They also work on the ground. I mentioned we worked in Africa and Latin America, so we work there with local partners, and we implement projects where we work together with local communities, with people really living there in those landscapes, and try to, together with them, figure out solutions on how to stop deforestation, while at the same time they can still have providing their income and have their agricultural activities, things like that. Yeah.
Okay. So would you say there's a lot of partnerships then between, for instance, your organization and other kind of movements that are working in the deforestation landscape? Like, is there a lot of conversations between you and other organizations, and of course, like national and international bodies? Is that something that's happening?
Yeah, sure. We need to work together to have a strong sort of unified voice.
Yeah.
Especially with the policy work, there's a lot of it's sort of joining forces with other NGOs to exchange information, to come up with a common narrative if we defend a specific cause. Like, for example, we work together in Belgium on this. We work a lot on this European law, and we do that together with WWF and Greenpeace. So that's when it comes to the policy work. But on the ground as well, so the field projects we have in countries with tropical forests, there we really work together with local NGOs, so national NGOs, because they know the context really well, and they know how their country and their landscapes work. So they implement those projects.
Okay, great. It sounds like there's a lot going on. So how do you see things changing for deforestation, or changing in terms of stopping deforestation or like slowing it down in the short term and long term future?
It's a really great question and a very difficult one to answer, because it's like predicting. So I don't have a glass ball to look into the future, because it's really there's pulling and pushing on different sides. So on the one hand, there's a lot of good things that are happening. So there's this European law. What is also really, and I didn't mention it that much, but it's really important as well, that the role of indigenous communities and of those local communities, the people that live close to or even within these forests, they also very often act as they're really defenders, defending their forest and protecting their forests. And so that role is getting a lot more recognition. I think there's also more awareness increasing, at least with consumers, with companies. So that's increasing as well. So there's this realization that things need to happen and need to change. But on the other hand, you mentioned it as well, there's a lot of voluntary commitments that are not necessarily working.
Yeah.
And there's also stuff pulling in the other direction. And what we see is now, especially with the current context, there's calls for more deregulation, for less rules, like European law. And we also see that the deforestation rate is not decreasing fast enough. So there's positive things, there's negative things. It's difficult to predict which direction it's going to go, but at least there are changes in the positive direction. Let's say
there is movement, there is life somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Right. Thanks for sharing. So, is there anything specifically that kind of keeps you hopeful for the future? So, I think there's. Yeah, like you said, there's some positive things happening, but also it's not moving as fast as we'd like it to move. So is there anything specific that kind of keeps you positive and keeps you motivated to keep going, that makes you think, yes, like this will get done, it's possible?
Yeah, recently I just read an article on that there's a chocolate company that is really paying attention to deforestation-free sourcing and paying a good income to the cocoa farmers they're sourcing from. And so that company has, I think they're not making a net profit yet, unfortunately, but at least they're getting closer to making a profit. So that means that there is, and it's a very expensive chocolate. So that means that there is more willingness from consumers, from people to really pay for this thing that's a bit more expensive maybe, but a lot fairer. And I think that's hopeful, because we, on the one hand, we need those products. I mean, or they're nice, very nice to have. And on the other, we need the money really to protect forest, and that money is channeled through the higher price. So that's at least a positive thing.
Okay, and finally, if there is one thing that you wish someone would take away from today's episode, if nothing else, what would it be?
I think maybe just the realization, or be a bit more aware that in your daily life, how much interaction you still have with forests, with tropical forests, without even realizing it, and how much benefit you get from it. It's like when you drink a cup of coffee, to be reminded that coffee originally comes from a tropical forest. Same with eating chocolate. If you ride a bike, your tires are made of rubber. Rubber comes from a tropical forest tree. I mean, wood is everywhere. So and in a more broad sense, like the everything, the temperature, how forests protect us against climate change, that also part of our daily life. So try to sort of be more aware of that, and maybe a bit grateful and inspired to take action to help protect those forests.
Okay, thank you so much. It was lovely having you on the show.
Happy to contribute, and thanks for giving us sort of a platform to also distribute our message. So happy to have been here.